In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Key virtue, the one that unlocks all the other virtues, is humility. The Fathers tell us that humility is the mother of all virtues, and if one gains humility, then everything else will follow. In this manner, humility and love, which is the greatest of the fruits of the Spirit, are closely linked. He who loves others gives his life for them, and the humble man puts others before himself. Our Lord Jesus Christ is love incarnate. Even while we were yet sinners, he gave his life for us that we might be saved. Our Lord is also the supreme example of humility. For even though he was the creator, he took upon himself the life of the creature, and that in lowering himself, he might raise us up to heaven. We heard in the epistle today of this same quality. And although the words love and humility are not specifically mentioned, their characteristics are described for us. We who are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. This is exactly what it means to love others and what it means to be humble. In the essence, it is the essence of love for someone that the strong, it is the essence of love for some that the strong man, not thinking of himself, should spend his strength carrying the burdens of his weaker brother. We who are united to one another by the love of God ought to do this. We ought to have this attitude towards our brethren. Perhaps you don't consider yourself strong, and yet there are times when your strength in particular, in a particular moment, a particular place, a particular situation, is greater than that of your brother or sister. When you find yourself in that situation, and indeed you are strong, and the task that God has given you is to use your strength to care for the weaker next to you. In a different circumstance, the situation may be reversed, where you are the weaker one, needing to be cared for by your neighbor, who is at this moment, in this situation, stronger. Here then is the seed and source of humility, to care for one another, to give help when you are able, and possibly even more difficult, to accept help when you need it. I was once asked, "Father, how do you do it? How do you live? You are so strong and we are all so weak." And I replied that I live by giving to others what God has given to me. And what I didn't say at that moment, but what is equally true, is that there are many times when I am in great need of help. And when I am weak, facing temptations or difficulties, and I need someone who is stronger than I to help me through. And in these times, it's you, all of you, each one of you who are strong and I am weak. I cannot begin to tell you how often your strength has come to my aid. When you have lifted me up and have assisted me in my life. When you have had exactly what I needed and have given it to me freely. We do indeed care for one another. The second quality of life of a humble person is that he doesn't please himself, but rather he considers that the needs and the edification of his neighbor. Does not God himself ever do this over and over again? Rather than destroy the sin which he hates in the world in which it breeds and lives, God has repeatedly stayed his hand and acted in love for our intentions and our interests, choosing to heal the hurts of sin and evil and to work with us that we might recover from this sickness that has infected us and by which we infect the world. This sickness is, of course, sin and death. And God, in order to cure us of this illness, lowered himself from heaven and took on our flesh, placing himself in the midst of the infection and filth of sin for our sake. He lived the life that we live. He suffered in this world as we do. He took upon himself all of our sins and bore them even to the cross and death for our sake. He became like us so that we might become like him. God did not please himself, but rather he considered us and our needs and acted on our behalf. In the same way, we must strive to live not for ourselves, but rather always considering the needs of our neighbor and acting on their behalf. This act of caring for others is not an easy one. Another person once told me, people expect me to give something to them, and I don't have anything. I feel like I've run out of me. We are, after all, finite beings with only limited strength and resources. If we constantly give of ourselves to others, it seems inevitable that we will someday run out of ourselves and have nothing left. The key to this is humility. We don't rely on giving solely on what we have of ourselves, for really we have nothing. It's not only necessary to give help, but equally necessary to accept help. This constant giving and receiving from one another allows that cycle to continue without anyone running out. Even more than this, though, we must remember that God himself is part of the equation. He gives to us freely of himself, and he is infinite. He is the bottomless God, the bottomless well upon which we can draw freely. He is the font from which flows the never-ending river of living water. God gives to us in abundance. And what we have received from God, we can freely give to others. For God will never run out of himself. He is a well and a fountain that will never run dry. It is indeed true that in ourselves we have nothing, for all we have comes from God. If God is the source of our life and our strength, then we can freely give all that we have and more and never run out. The key here is not to give out of me, but to give out of all that God has given to me, in order that we might not forget that he cares for us. God has given us to us many reminders, especially in the scripture, of his care for us. It's good to be acquainted not only with the gospel and the epistles, but also to read the whole of the Old Testament as well, and the law and the prophets, the stories of God's care for his people throughout the ages. The lives of the saints also teach us not only about the provision of God for us, but also give us examples of how we're able to give to others out of the riches of grace that God gave to them. Today, for example, we also remember the martyr Callinicus, who was a young man raised in the Christian faith during the time of the Roman persecution. He was brought before the governor, who threatened him with torture if he did not sacrifice to idols. Callinicus refused to accede to the governor's demands, despite the tortures that were imposed upon him. His courageous suffering in the name of Jesus Christ was so influential to the people that the governor decided to drive him away from the city and there to continue the torture. He had Callinicus shod in iron shoes with nails pointed inward so that his feet would be pierced with each step. And the soldiers then took him away from the city and drove him out. But they drove him into a dry country, and they were thirsty, for there were no wells. Callinicus, setting aside his own torment, his own suffering, and rather than allow these soldiers who were his tormentors and his guards to suffer discomfort, he prayed to God and brought forth water from a rock to quench their thirst, after which they drove him on until finally he was beheaded. See how Callinicus, who was poor, he had nothing, no worldly resources. He was a prisoner and weak. He was powerless. And yet he set aside his own suffering and was able to meet the needs of the soldiers by the rich abundance of God's grace. All of this is for our encouragement, to constantly remind us that we are in the hand of God, who provides for us, and that in imitation of his life, we set aside ourselves, even our own needs and desires, our own suffering, and live instead for others who are in need. The end result of this mutual giving is that we are united to one another And having shared all that we have and all that we are with one another, and in turn having received all that we have and all that we are, both from God and from our brethren, we are then united to one another and are become one with God and with each other. For this reason, through the grace of God, we are able to lift up our minds and our hearts in unity and to pray with one voice, with one mind and with one mouth. We glorify God. And not only us here in this small community, but we are united with all of those who are united to Christ in every place and in every time. In this manner, we are united with the saints, and they with us, so that together, with one mind and heart, glorifying God, we may enter into the reward of his kingdom. All this has come to us through humility, the mother of all virtues, and through love, the greatest fruit of the Holy Spirit. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.